Welcome everybody. Today I'm joined by Global Pharma Marketing Leader Elisabeth Mostofi. Elisabeth, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hi Miriam, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this session, and I'm doing very well, thank you. I hope you're also enjoying some nice summer days.
Definitely, yes. The sun's come out in the UK and we're very happy about it. We can't stop talking about it. So it's hopefully it's here to stay for a couple of weeks. I'm really excited to chat to you today about various things, about your career and your kind of achievements in pharma and marketing. But let's start right at the very beginning. Tell us a little bit about your career to date.
Thank you. Thank you very much for asking. I would say I have maybe a kind of a classical career in pharma, but then not too classical at all. Pharmaceutical industry, I would say, is an conglomerate of many people of many backgrounds. Many people, of course, with scientific background, with natural science background. I am an economist by training. So this is maybe a little bit of a different approach to pharmaceutical business overall. But it has been a very nice and a very good and inspirational part of my life. I started as a rep. I started as a commercial rep in pharma, and I think it's very important. We are working in commercial entities. It's important to learn. It's important to learn how to sell, how to listen to customers, and feeling particularly as a non-scientist, feeling somehow comfortable to move in the medical environment and in different therapeutical areas. Then I moved on and learned national marketing. So here you have one country and you deal with the specific needs of the patients, the payers, the healthcare environment in that particular country. Very important to understand the patient, and you can really deep dive into customer needs. And then I had a chance to move on into regional marketing, where you start actually to aggregate countries on a higher level. And then there is a change of customer, because the country colleague that you are serving becomes your customer. Of course, you're working with HCPs and on patient needs, but basically you're supporting your country colleagues. And finally, I had a chance to elevate one more level to global marketing, where basically you're serving the world from the United States to Japan and anything in between. So this becomes a very heterogeneous approach. It's an international environment, and you learn a lot on your own skills, how to manage organizations, how to drive decisions, how you manage matrix organization and matrix teams. And you need to develop a very sensitive and agile way with regard to diversity and inclusion in particular.
Definitely. It sounds like you've had a really interesting career and kind of seen all avenues of pharma and got some really great experience there. So you've spoken a lot about how you're an advocate for gender equality in healthcare. Can you tell us a little bit about any of the disparities that you've seen when it comes to this working, in global pharma?
So Miriam, as you know, this is one of my very passionate topics, and the vision to provide equity in healthcare and equality in healthcare is a vision that I'm driving towards, and I try to apply, in every role that I take in the pharmaceutical industry. And luckily, I can drive quite a lot. But the topic per se is very important, but very big. So in order to advance, you need to break it into chunks. You need to break it into pieces. And gender equity and equality is only one aspect of driving patient centricity, focusing on individual patient needs. So for instance, let's look at data and clinical relevance. In many therapeutic areas, for instance, and I take big therapeutic areas like cardiovascular or respiratory, data about efficacy and safety of drugs are mainly derived from male patients. This is the way how many clinical trials have been set up. But it's very essential to broaden the patient perspective and reflect realities. For instance, including female patients and different ethnicities. And then also look at relevant PROs. PROs, it's an acronym for patient-related outcomes. So something that is relevant for a patient, how you measure success of a management strategy or a therapeutic intervention. And here I give you an example. Questionnaires. Questionnaires are used very often, in clinical trials or in other settings. And when you include, for instance, a question to measure quality of life, do you do your household shopping? A male patient of coming maybe from a traditional family wouldn't care about it. And if he can or cannot do it, does not have a very big impact on his quality of life. If you ask this question to a female patient, coming also from a traditional family, maybe a little bit of an older age, this particular activity would mean a lot to her. Mm-hmm. And doing it or not being able to engage with this for whatever reason might have a very, very higher impact, negative impact on the quality of life. So you need to be very meaningful, actually, which questions you're using, or particularly to assess quality of life. And then let me talk a little bit about access to medication. Mm-hmm. Even in our well-developed healthcare systems, and here I'm looking towards Europe, for instance, or United States, we see that female patients have less or later access to innovative medicine. This becomes evident in areas with big healthcare burden. For instance, again, cardiovascular disease or respiratory. And receiving the right disease management is important for treatment success. Also, access and time to access the medication is still dependent on available income. And we all know here females in general are lagging behind. This is particularly alarming looking at the aging populations of developed and developing countries. And when we take a broad perspective and look at this gap from a global perspective, we must provide education and healthcare access to females in other parts of the world. And here I'm looking towards India, Latin America, or Africa. Mm-hmm. And usually the woman is the one who is the healthcare manager for the whole family.
So true. Definitely. I think as well, we take it for granted, certainly in the UK, obviously we have the NHS, which obviously is amazing. And, you know, we take it for granted that we can walk into our GP and we can get access to what we need. We can walk into our pharmacy and get access to what we need and not really think about it. But for those, and especially you've talked about women there in those countries such as, you know, Latin America, India, that's something that just is so inaccessible to so many people. And then I imagine then small problems end up being huge problems because of that, you know, that lack of accessibility to kind of basic healthcare, basic medicine. And it sounds like you're in a really great position to drive that change, and I can hear the passion from you. It's wonderful to hear, and being in the position that you are, you'll be a cog in that, you know, in that change, driving that forward, particularly on a global scale as well. So what do you think that pharmaceutical organizations can do to assist in rectifying these disparities in healthcare? You mentioned you know, things like questionnaires can be very biased. Is there anything else, any kind of practical advice that they can do to kind of drive that change forward?
Yes, Miriam, I think I'm really in a lucky position, and I'm really try to you know, broaden the perspective and find you know, likewise minds throughout the industry. And it's not only the industry, there is much more, particularly looking at the issues, the challenges to close the gap in gender or overall healthcare disparities. In the pharmaceutical industry, we provide a lot of data, we generate a lot of data, right? This is maybe one of the key assets that we as pharmaceutical marketeers, commercial people, or scientists can provide. Providing data and developing treatment or management plans, I think, is something that we can contribute. And then aggregating the data to a higher level, so big data, to help shape understanding of underserved patient groups. This is something that overall as a pharmaceutical industry we can do, and we can also build together the better understanding about gender or age-related factors and ethnicities. These are only the 3 big factors, of course, that you can carve out. There are many more, of course. Interacting with societies. There is a whole big area of education. So societies, patient groups, payers, we need to educate, and we need to help particularly educate the next generation of healthcare professionals. That can also help us to eliminate social bias. There is a very interesting group of behavioral scientists that can really help drive the right language. Language, as you know, is very powerful, and it can also help to eliminate some of the bias between a patient, a female patient, for instance, and a male HCP, to really find the right words and the right level of care and attention. And then, of course, driving this education and particularly access-related challenges in developing countries. I think these are all areas that pharmaceutical industry can help to provide to society.
Definitely. It's really interesting how you spoke about language there. I completely agree with you. Language is so powerful. And, you know, a lot of, you know, academia, I guess, is written by the majority of the time white males, and sometimes they don't really realize that their language is biased towards a certain group of people, towards a certain gender or ethnicity or whatever. And I think we're all getting a lot more switched on to that as well. If you think about things like pronouns, where we normally have he and she, it's opened up now, and we're having to think about our language a lot more. So I imagine that would transpire as well into the healthcare industry to, you know, make sure that we're not being biased, or we're being as least biased as we possibly can. And that can only benefit the people that we're serving.
Yes, language overall is very powerful. A very, very powerful instrument. And sometimes the words that we are using are based on beliefs, of course, on our upbringing, on our education, and they usually represent a certain, I would say, a certain imagination that you want to create. Definitely. And that can be good or bad. And this is also sometimes linked to the let's say, unconscious bias that is exhibited. There are many, many stereotypes, of course, that we are transporting with our mind, with our language, wanted or unwanted. And sometimes, you know, these provide barriers to understanding.
Absolutely, 100%. So if the last year has taught us anything, it's that organizations need to react to change and transform quickly. What would you say are the key points for transformation success?
So this is now coming to an area that I think everyone has lived in individually, right? We are all talking virtually. We don't meet so many people. I personally miss the human factor a bit, I have to say. I also miss traveling. I miss talking in person and meeting in person colleagues or you know, colleagues from around the world. What I have seen in many organizations, particularly also in my organization, is an increase of agility and curiosity. And this is something that I would see also as one of the biggest boosts in this transformative times, paired with a need to have an organization that allows for failure. Because how can you advance, you know, if you cannot make mistakes? And this is something that we all have to learn. We know, usually, you know, in our upbringing, we don't talk about failures, right? And God forbid, and you know, you make a mistake. But the good thing is when you do a mistake, first you do it, meaning that you really experience something based on a contribution that you do. and you can learn from it. This is something that I find very important in our organization. Apart from the curiosity and from the change of this hierarchical organization, we are also establishing something that is called, an area of psychological safety that is lived by most teams, if not all. But it's also something that, you need to learn. For instance, if you're working in this psychological safe hub, if I want to say, you should be able to say, within your teams, I have never done this. I don't know how to do this. How can we, achieve something? Or you can also voice your concerns. Or if you may, you can also voice another idea. So this is something that I find currently also very inspiring, that we talk virtually, yes, but we do have, let's say, the permission to fail and to advance and really live this new norm as we are all working now.
Absolutely. And I think it would be interesting to know if we would still have that change if the past year had been very different. I think we're all experiencing something that we've never experienced before. And that's given us the green light to be able to fail and be able to kind of pick ourselves up again and try again, because we're all experiencing something that's completely new. So how could we possibly do things right the first time? And yeah, it would just be interesting to know whether we would be at that point had this year panned out differently. It's interesting. I think it's propelled a lot of people forward because that change had to be so quick. People had to adapt, and therefore people failed more. And then came out the other side of it and are better for it and stronger for it. So it's really interesting to think. And it's so refreshing hearing someone like you in your position saying that it's okay to fail. I think a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves. So coming from you, that means a lot, that you've given us all the green light to fail and pick ourselves up again.
I think if I just may add, I think failure is important to advance, just in general, right?
Yeah.
But what we need to learn I think in all industries, based on the acceleration of time, I would say, or the acceleration of the way we work, is to measure. And that's maybe something that we are not super good at, because we don't know exactly which KPIs to use in many ways. And again, this is an evolving part, but we should not refrain to learn and to measure always.
Absolutely. That's what makes us stronger, right? That's what makes us better. I wanted to go back briefly to what you said about language, and particularly, in your position as a pharma marketing leader, how important is storytelling when it comes to marketing, both visually and verbally, the kind of visual language we use and the verbal language?
So as I alluded to, language is a very powerful tool. We talk to the rational part of our brains, I should say, right? And we also want to connect with the much bigger and underlying emotional part. If you see it, like the famous iceberg model that, is used many times, the rational part is a very small part compared to the emotions, to beliefs, to positive or negative experience of an individual. And what you want to do is you want to create imagination, right? So when you start with a story, you really want to ignite the brain. And for that, you need to use the right language, best if it's paired with the right visual, to transport and to help underpin the imagination. There are common beliefs and emotions that are associated with words or sentences. And sometimes you're using the words even without knowing what the other person is actually understanding by this. I can also give you a very easy example. If I tell you, Miriam, the bird is in the air, what would you think about that? Or what would you say? What is your immediate imagination on that?
I'd picture a bird in the sky.
Flying.
Flying, yeah.
All right. And by this, you already have a kind of a perspective. So you are on the ground, the bird is in the air.
Yeah.
I haven't said anything about that.
No.
I did not say that the bird is flying or not flying.
It's
right?
so interesting, yeah.
So you are immediately, picturing, something that is based on your experience, because most likely when you walk outside, you see birds flying in the air. But I did not say that the bird is flying. So you see already the power of words. And just imagine if this would be paired with the right image.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I think now in the time of virtual means, where we are, getting much more savvy on virtual tools, also videos, this combination of word, maybe sound, and visualization becomes very, very important, very powerful, even more powerful than just words, and is very essential, particularly as in many ways, we are not talking to each other anymore. We are sending videos, or we are sharing videos, or any other kind of visual storytelling.
Absolutely. That's definitely going to make me think about how I write things and how I communicate things now. And I'm also going to share that analogy with my team as well and see what everyone says, whether it's the same as what I said. That's really interesting. I wanted to go back and focus a little bit on your career again. What would you say is the biggest achievement in your career so far, the achievement that you're most proud of?
I think we have learned a lot. And as I said, in my career, every day is actually paired with a learning factor. Mm-hmm. What I'm currently really proud of, that we have really achieved a launch during the pandemic. So, in any kind of, let's say, business, when you're launching a brand, you do it once. Yes, you can change, some bits and pieces, but eventually you're starting the success and the trajectory at launch. So you launch once, and launching during pandemic in a virtual world, and I have to say in the field of respiratory, which of course is hit particularly by the pandemic, has been a very, very huge challenge, which we have overcome together with our country colleagues. A lot of learnings, a lot of failures also. Nevertheless, we have been able to launch to the needs of the patients. And this particular launch has also been recognized by the European Medical Agency, which, for us is a very, very important a public body to really recognize the importance of public health care and the contribution to the advancements of particularly asthma, in this instance, to patients. This does not happen very often, I have to say. And for a marketeer, this is a kind of a medal that you have won. So these are current my happy moments.
Absolutely. Wear that medal with pride. I think doing anything in the pandemic and what we've experienced is an achievement, big or small. And to know that you were kind of working within that kind of, assisting key workers in a way. Obviously with pharmaceutical, you said you were very heavily involved with the respiratory side of things. That's integral to what we've experienced last year. So yes, wear that medal with pride. You should be very, very proud. So obviously you're a global pharma marketing leader. What would you say makes a great leader in your experience?
A great leader, I think, apart from curiosity and agility, is somebody who is authentic. Mm-hmm. And that word has also become very popular in recent, I would say, recent years. It's even more important now that we are trying to be authentic using virtual means, which, in former days might have been an oxymoron. So how can you do that? But this is the way we are working now. And having a team support that starts with trust. I think trust and reliance. This is also something that I have learned in many, many years, in many teams, of course, in many instances. We need to come away from this hierarchical approach and really allow equal responsibility or voices, I would say, and also respect. And that is, for me, a fundamental part of trust, which we are trying to live in our teams every day. Sometimes better, sometimes not so good, but the trust level, I think, is increasing more and more, and really allows our new way of working in the virtual world to flourish.
Absolutely. Really, really great advice there. And I think we've come so far from, you know, say, rewind 50 or so years, and the boss was the boss. And there was that hierarchy, and you wouldn't challenge, or you wouldn't kind of talk to your boss in a way that you maybe would now. And I think we've come so far since then, and for the better as well. And having that respect, having that communication and that trust is only going to nurture the next generation of leaders, you know, within our teams. Really great advice there. I love that. What advice would you give to your former self? So imagine rewinding, you know, 10 or so years. What advice did you give former Elisabeth?
I think we are all working in a time where you need to constantly learn. Mm-hmm. You know, in former years, we were talking about the learning organization. I think it needs to go much more beyond that. It's the learning individual. You need to advance. So I don't think that the next generation of leaders, you know, having one education will be sufficient. You will have many, let's say, jobs or challenges that come with those jobs in your life, and it's not going to be too repetitive. So again, fostering the agility simply by learning, taking on as many opportunities to work in different teams in different areas as you can, because you never know where and how you might need it. Me personally, I do another education, you know, every couple of years, mm-hmm. Simply because I think it broadens the horizon. Again, I don't know if I will need it or not, but simply it gives me a different perspective, and talking to other industries is always very, very helpful, so that we are not fostering our own pharmaceutical silo, for instance. So if I would give another advice to my former younger self and to the colleagues, it's simply take any opportunity to learn. It could be a secondment or whatever, you know, the organization is offering, and go outside your comfort zone.
Definitely. Great advice. So my last question for you, Elisabeth, is what's next for your industry, and what future trends and innovations do you see?
Yes, so there is definitely something that we need to do all as humans, which is fight the pandemic. And we will see how the future is evolving. But this first and foremost is important to save lives, to help economies, you know, to flourish again. And while I have to say, I hate the word the new norm, but it's new for many. So there will be many new aspects of our daily lives, work life or private lives. But we need to see that we really deal with the COVID virus, with the COVID variants, and really, again, save lives. This is, I think, the important challenge for all of us. For us in pharmaceutical industry, we do have a very, very big opportunity with big data. And I think that also goes beyond just, you know, individual companies. If we look at the data that is generated on many areas, and if we really have a good structure and good algorithm, we can cluster the data to really find out this patient-centric approach that I would be very happy to see coming to life in the future. One aspect of this patient-centric approach, for instance, is gene therapy. which is a very, very agile, growing, and very important field of the business, where you really cannot go more individual than that. But there are other therapeutic areas that need a similar approach. And I'm very certain that not only big data, but also digital approach can help. And here, this needs to be a collaboration with many stakeholders. Here, I'm looking also towards governments, for instance, telehealth opportunities. And I know it's a very, very big and very ambiguous word, but to help patients seeing the doctor and help a doctor being more confident using, let's say, new technology to avoid traveling, to avoid time, and to increase the interaction, I think is another big opportunity. But again, this needs to be tackled together.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. Thank you so much for your time today, Elisabeth. I think you've given our listeners and our viewers a lot to think about and a lot to take away. It's been really interesting to hear your insights, and thank you again for being so open and sharing them with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Miriam. And again, I'm very, very happy to connect also with future listeners. So I'm more than happy to learn, and really let's shape the future here together. Thank you.
Thank you.